with that 60% enriched uranium. I think they can start with dirty bomb.
There is something that personally makes me really sad, and that's what media is not paying enough attention, or they're not talking enough about. It's Iranian people. While the missiles fly, the Iranian people are in total darkness, internet blackout, economic collapse, and even 100 times, even not more, worse reality than before the war.
They need to survive, and also they need to survive because they have nowhere to go. They're in control of the oil revenue, and they have deep pockets.
For the audience watching or listening who wants a free and secular Iran, if the 10-point and 15-point demands are irreconcilable, what is the most likely military endgame?
It's a very fragile ceasefire. And even if it holds, I think it will be only a matter of time before the guns start again. The IRGC should be expected to immediately start rebuilding its missile bases. The military industry will start to rebuild, as they did after the 12-day war.
There is a serious and maybe concerning question. So there is tactical and operational achievements, but mission is not accomplished yet.
I think Iran has the capability for developing fairly quickly an ICBM, because the IRGC and the Ministry of Defense, they have had separate programs to develop SLVs, satellite launch vehicles.
Having a new Kim Jong-un, the Iranian version would be more probable than Delcy Rodriguez.
They will probably build better ones, I'm afraid. I think they will build better missile bases. They will develop better missiles, better drones. They don't care about the people. They don't care about infrastructure at all.
Welcome back. We are living through what may be the most volatile 2 weeks in modern history. After 40 days of unprecedented conflict between the United States and Israel on one side, regime of Iran on the other side, a fragile ceasefire stands. But beneath the surface, the gears of war and high-stakes diplomacy are still turning. To understand the why behind the missiles, the secret negotiations in Islamabad, and the survival tactics of the Islamic regime, we are joined by one of the world's preeminent security and defense analysts. He is a senior fellow at Washington Institute for Near East Policy and veteran historian of the Iran-Iraq War, and the man who has spent decades mapping the technical and psychological architecture of the IRGC. Dr. Farzin Nadimi, it's a real honor to have you here.
The honor is all mine. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Before we dive into the current battlefield, I want to understand the lens through which you see the world. You grew up during the 1979 revolution and the Iran-Iraq war. Many people look at war as a tragedy to escape. You chose to make war studies your life's work at King's College. What a specific moment in your youth convinced you that you needed to master the mechanics of military power to understand Iran's future?
I'm from a generation that grew up in the revolution of war, and to a large degree that was inevitable. Later, when I had the opportunity to choose what to study at King's College, I studied the theories of war, and especially when I was supposed to write a dissertation, I chose the topic of Hark Island. I had co-authored a book on the Iran-Iraq Air War, and realized that Hark Island was a very unique part of of the psyche of Iran during that war, and they're one of the front lines. I studied and wrote my dissertation on Hark Island, which was the start of getting even more submerged in the history of Iran's oil industry and its economic warfare when I was later I did my PhD.
It is amazing, at the same time fascinating, how you found your true calling at early ages. Thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about the last 40 days. The U.S. has shown overwhelming force, but the regime is still standing. By all open source accounts, the Iranian Navy and air defense system have been decimated. Yet they managed to strike Diego Garcia, and reportedly, so they downed F-15 and the rescue mission afterward. In your professional evaluation, the IRGC performed better or worse than Western intelligence anticipated in a high-intensity conflict?
Well, I think for years the IRGC planned to operate as it did. It was the IRGC, the Islamic regime, was at war with Israel, with the United States for decades. And they have been planning for exactly this kind of war for a long time, probably under different circumstances. Yes, it was their perfect sacred defense or sacred war against the imperialistic regimes of the so-called imperialistic regimes of the Persian Gulf, the monarchies, the U.S. imperialist, quote unquote, and the Zionist entity, quote unquote, all together. It was just the perfect war, but they planned it under different circumstances. They hoped that they would do it with better economies, under effective air defense umbrella, and with a more cohesive society. They wanted the ultimate war to be much better coordinated with much more powerful proxies. The Hezbollah, the Iraqi Shiites, and the Hamas in Gaza. But it didn't pan out that way. Their relations with the Iranian people was it probably as one of its worst times, especially after the massacre of Iranians in January of this year. Practice after just years of Israeli intensive war with Hezbollah, with Hamas, they weren't in a good shape, so to say. Iran's economy is much worse than they hoped for when they were planning such a war of final war, let's say, with the imperialists. So this wasn't a perfect time or perfect conditions, but again, the planning was there. The IRGC missile force had been making for years. It started during Iran-Iraq War. I argue that it started during the offensive phase, after they liberated Iranian lands from the Iraqis, and they started to seriously think about dismantling the Ba'ath regime and toppling Saddam Hussein. First, foremost, obtaining ballistic missiles from Libya and then North Korea, and at a later stage after the war ended, they staged this ballistic missile industry with the help of North Korea, and then they obtained help from after the collapse of the Soviet Union from Russian scientists, and Ukrainian scientists helped them. But again, to a large degree, it was a locally developed industry with the help of foreigners, foreign technologies, but mostly local industries. Built all those missile bases underground, highly reinforced, hardened missile bases that we know how effective they are in terms of resistance to bombing. And they developed their asymmetric naval tactics with all those small speedboats, exactly to avoid the conventional navy in equal terms. So they built a large number of small speedboats with heavily armed rocket launchers, later anti-ship missiles, and they built up this array of hardened coastal defensive infrastructure, hardened facilities, defensive fortifications, offensive mining capability, and now cruise missiles and anti-ship ballistic missiles. So they have these multi-layered offensive and defensive naval capabilities. They have their short, medium, and long-range ballistic missile capabilities. Specifically with the objective of reaching Israel in sacred war of when they decide to destroy Israel as a country in the Middle East, but also to put pressure on the United States and United States bases in the region, exactly because the United States would be expected to support Israel in this existential. Also, they developed this mosaic defense for their ground forces, the IRGC, the besieged, and later they developed the besieged to become an integral part of the IRGC in the past 12 years or so.
So obviously, as you mentioned, they have been prepared for this for years. What is the real estimation? It's hard to do that, but maybe there are some open source intelligence or some sources that you have access to. There are some estimation, thousands, 2,000, 3,000, 10,000, so half of this is gone, 70% is blown up, and then what's your read on into this, kind of estimations?
Well, without access to secret intelligence, these are all estimates, open source estimates. We cannot be sure.
Obviously, yeah.
Even if we hear estimates from the governments, intelligence communities, again, they are declassified. But this has been in June war, this latest war, these have been the first cases of true long-range fires war between two states. And these are very unique because there is no exchange of lands, there is no foot soldiers, mostly long-range fires exchanges, and the effects of these long-range fires is the determining factor. Although there are other factors like narrative war is very important in long-range fires war because how you define victory and how you project victory and success is very important. And we are seeing these days these narratives that the Iranian regime and the U.S. administration and the Israeli government are putting out about how they achieved historic. Iran started this war with an arsenal of thousands of ballistic missiles. Well, there have been various estimates of between 2,000 and 3,000 missiles that have a range of, sufficient to reach Israel, which is over 1,200 kilometers, up to a range of 2,000 kilometers, which is the maximum range of Khorramshahr 4 missile. And they had about twice that size of ballistic missiles with ranges sufficient to reach Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and Bahrain. Therefore, they have a large number of missiles. And we can assume that even though there have been reports of large stockpiles of missiles have been destroyed, and we have been seeing videos of these missile stockpiles and bases continuously pounded by air power, by standoff and standing bombing missions. Again, we can safely assume that at least half of that missile stockpile survived the bombings specifically because they have been stored in heavily
Protected.
reinforced, protected.
Perfect. So this is a great point. You have analyzed the Fatah and Iran's underground missile cities for years. Based on your research, what is the ace they haven't played yet? Is there a capability, perhaps in the realm of EMP technology or advanced Russian-supplied electronic warfare, that Washington should be genuinely worried about during the truce?
Well, Russia has provided Iran with some capabilities to jam satellite communications, to jam drone communications, and Iran has been using those capabilities. There were some videos shown released by the Israeli Defense Forces, by the CENTCOM, that showed some of those jamming stations targeted and destroyed. But we can assume that Iran has retained capabilities to jam GPS signals, and we see that these capabilities exists, and also satellite communications. Whether they will expand, we can assume that with the ceasefire and cessation of hostilities, Iran will try to buy more electronic warfare equipment from Russia and probably from China as well, in order to better defend against GPS guided weapons, precision guided weapons, and also GPS guided loitering drones and one-way attack drones like Lucas, which is guided by this Starlink system.
Right. Okay, so nothing, really horrific to be worried about, at least something which is known.
Well, Iran has very advanced ballistic missile technology with regard to precision and warhead survivability.
That
We
they
can
haven't
assume.
used it yet?
Well, they have used their Khorramshahr missile with that the cluster. The warheads have constantly been using them against Israeli cities because of their survivability. They are more likely to survive Israeli anti-missile interceptors because they open up at high altitude and they release those submunitions. And what some versions have released 80 submunitions, some about 35, depending on the type of the missile and the submunitions.
The reason that I'm asking this because there has been a constant rhetoric about you haven't seen what we still have, what we haven't used yet. I don't know. It's pure 100% rhetoric, or there might be something.
Well, eh, there have been probably a couple of missile types, or that we know that they unveiled and they're shown. We don't know if they've entered any serious production or operational status. There is a version, the electro-optically guided version of
Qasem
the
Basir, I suppose.
Qasem Soleimani missile, which is named Qasem Basir, or a similar version of a mod ballistic missile, which probably we haven't seen them operationally used. There's also the second generation of Fatah ballistic missile, the Fatah 2, which has on its nose it has a hypersonic cruise missile, HCM warhead. This HCM can be very deadly if used. It has a precision guided capability, and it can be used against maritime targets, for example, aircraft carriers. So at some point, if they develop an anti-ship version of these Fatah 2 missiles, they can pose serious threats against aircraft carrier groups. We heard that during this 37-day operation, they launched at least 100 cruise missiles and ballistic missiles against Abraham Lincoln carrier strike group alone, but none of them were successful. They shut them down. But if they use a very sophisticated anti-ship hypersonic cruise missiles against these targets, we can assume that they might have better chances in the future.
Right. So the next question is about possibilities and probabilities. That there are whispers that the regime has used the fog of war to move 60% enriched uranium to black sites for final weaponization. Realistically, do you think they are close to a dirty bomb or ICBM capability today compared to 40 days ago?
I think Iran has the capability for developing fairly quickly an ICBM, because IRGC and the Ministry of Defense, they have had separate programs to develop SLVs, satellite launch vehicles. And we know that there are technological overlaps between ICBMs and SLVs, especially the solid propellant versions, the Aghaim and Ghasset SLVs that IRGC has been developing look very much like military ballistic missiles, and they are highly mobile. They seem to be technologically matured. Therefore, I don't think that they will have any problem further developing those rockets into ICBMs. And the capabilities there. I think it's only a matter of funding and a safe place to do that, probably somewhere underground. We can assume that in the future they will move a lot of their missile development and production underground, and in order to survive future strikes. But the episode of the Diego Garcia missile strike that showed that there have been some work in progress with regard to developing missiles with ranges that can reach 4,000 kilometers. I spoke to people who said the trajectory of the missile actually proved that those missiles had the sufficient range. Fortunately, they were shot down, or they had developed technical problems, couldn't reach their targets, but the trajectory was there. What type of missiles they are, I'm not sure. They could be further developed Khorramshahr missiles or developed Qasset. I'm not sure about any of those. Either way, it shows that, as suspected, I had suspected this for many years, that they were developing IRBMs, and they were having Diego Garcia on their sides as a potential target.
So how about the weaponization of enriched uranium?
We can almost be sure that with this regime in place, and it's still the same regime, no matter how politicians are trying to portray that as a completely new regime, I think this still same regime, probably even more vengeful.
Hardline, yeah, exactly.
Hardline and very much determined to become even more powerful. Therefore, achieving the nuclear weapon status, I think that's where this regime will go. And with that 60% enriched uranium, I think they can start with dirty bomb. Yes, that's that's the quickest way
Possibility,
of
yeah.
possibility. But I think they also will consider types of nuclear weapons that are easier to develop and field, like the gun type, the Hiroshima style nuclear bomb. They are much easier to develop and produce compared to the implosion device. That they are more sophisticated because of the explosive mechanism is more complex. But the gun side bomb is much easier, and I think that could be where they want to initially go, and then they will develop further and probably produce several designs of their atomic bombs. Looking back at their missile program, I try to learn about how they think about developing complex projects. If we look at how when they decided to develop a precision-guided ballistic missile, they commissioned scientific groups from Russia, from Ukraine, and from Iran separately without any of them knowing about the other. And they developed the technologies, guidance, very precision guidance technologies for the ballistic missiles, and any of them achieved results, and they were filled in. And we can assume that for their future nuclear weapons, they will do the same. Developing dirty bombs, developing gun-type bombs, and developing implosion devices. I think they will try to go down all those avenues.
It's not hard to imagine, specifically after this war, that if they survive, which I believe, it's not over yet, they definitely, will look for some sort of ultimate deterrence, which is obviously a nuclear bomb. We have seen reports of UAE involvement in the strikes as recently as this morning. So, how fragile is this ceasefire when regional players like UAE and Israel seem to have different red lines than the Trump administration?
Yes, I think it's a very fragile ceasefire, and even if it holds, I think it will be only a matter of time
Right.
before the guns start again. The IRGC should be expected to immediately start rebuilding its missile bases. The military industry will start to rebuild, as they did after the 12-day war. Pressure from the now very militarized political establishment, and I think that will very quickly show the Western countries, United States, Israel, that they probably would need to go back in pretty soon. Well, but because of the level of damage that they inflicted during this 37-day war, it probably might be a little longer compared to the 12-day war. But within a year, I think if this ceasefire holds for a few days or for a 2-week period that it was designed for, I think within a year we will see another round of very high intensity fighting between Iran and the United States and Israel.
Realistically, who does this 2-week pause benefit more? Is it the U.S. allowing them to reposition assets because they are deploying more assets and drop oil prices, which already happened? Or is it the IRGC giving them time to dig in and hide their remaining mobile launchers among civilian infrastructures, or resupplying from China and Russia? What do you think? Who's the winner of this 2-week pause?
I think all sides will benefit from this pause. All sides are tired. All sides have empty magazines, and I think that this pause will give them time to fill back their stocks, and Israel also will have more time to look at Lebanon and try to deal with the Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, at least until the pressures from the United States. There's a degree that they will have to stop as well. But for now, we see that Israel probably has a green light from the U.S. administration to go ahead and try to address the Hezbollah problem. But yes, I think all sides will try to reposition. The United States definitely will try to replenish their bomb stocks and try to move in some assets. We know that an aircraft carrier is on its way. The USS Boxer carrier group, USS George W. Bush, probably will replace USS Ford, but maybe another carrier group will be in the region in the coming months as well. For Iran will watch very closely, definitely, and I think both Israeli and U.S. satellites and even drones will watch Iranian movements, IRGC's missiles, arsenal movements, their launchers, but they will try to do as much as possible under concealed conditions, but again, they will watch very closely, but it will not prevent them from trying to rebuild and move assets around as they did after the coup.
Right. You mentioned Hezbollah as the most powerful or the most important, proxy for the Islamic regime. And we know that Pakistan mediated this deal and Iran claims Lebanon is included, but Israel is intensifying strikes on Beirut as we speak. If Lebanon is excluded, does the axis effectively collapse, leaving the IRGC alone in the next round of fighting?
Yes, I think if the IRGC does not intervene in support of Hezbollah, I think that will seriously degrade the level of trust between the two. But I am also suspect that probably at some point the U.S. administration will put enough pressure on the Israeli government to stop the heavy bombing at least the heavy bombing that they are subjecting Hezbollah to. However, there is also another issue, and that's the presence of Israeli forces south of the Litani River. And I'm not sure that Israel is in a position to leave Lebanon right now. Therefore, there is going to be frictions there. And how I think the IRGC will try to stay. Iran will try to stay away from a localized friction between Israel and Hezbollah until. But at some point, maybe if there is a major exchange of bombings and missiles in the future, the IRGC will pressure the regime to intervene in some way. So far, nothing from the Iranian side, and we have to see whether that will continue.
Is it fair to say, as long as it's not existential to Hezbollah, so Iran rather not to intervene? Okay.
Yes, I think that's a fair conclusion.
Good. So another issue is the name Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf is being floated as a top negotiator. You have followed his career from the IRGC to the parliament. Given his history in the suppression apparatus, can the West actually negotiating a lasting peace with a man who is essentially the personification of the IRGC interests?
Well, call me very skeptical. I'm very skeptical about the whole negotiating thing between the United States and the quote unquote new regime in Iran. I think that whoever that now is responsible for these negotiations do not have any different agenda, different mandate to negotiate with the administration. And I'm very skeptical about whether they are willing or prepared to relent in very important aspects of a missile program and nuclear enrichment and their proxy relations, you name it. I don't think probably the president is trying to play with the minds of the Iranian regime or certain factions within the regime, or there are political reasons, of domestic political reasons. There are market reasons. The price of oil you mentioned, but I'm highly skeptical that any negotiations will reach any real conclusions that will result in lasting peace in the region.
So before our conversation, there was a breaking news that Vice President Vance and U.S. Envoy with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner is heading toward, Islamabad. So there is a deep fear among Iranians that the U.S. is looking for Delcy Rodriguez model like Venezuela, a regime insider who can keep the oil flowing while the system remains intact. Why is this model a mirage when it comes to the ideological structure of the Islamic Republic?
Well,
I believe it's an illusion.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there are a lot of differences between Venezuela and Iran. Foremost, I think the most obvious the difference is the Venezuelan military junta. The military is very pro-Western, even though they try to look anti-Bolivarian, but the Venezuelan military is pro-Western, and they didn't pose serious problem regarding the removal of the Maduro. With regard to Iran, I think the predominant military security force in Iran is IRGC, still very anti-Western. I don't believe that we can count in Artesh very much. Artesh showed that they are very much neutralized, and even we should not very much count on Artesh for even a supporting role in any future revolutions. I highly doubt that and the Venezuelan model will work. Even Ghalibaf, I can't see any real moderate figures within the security establishment in Iran that could support such a model. Even Ghalibaf I don't think it's in that position in that position to do much help, and therefore, to a large degree, I think that's mostly wishful thinking.
Yeah, some analysts believe, so having a new Kim Jong-un, the Iranian version would be more probable than Delcy Rodriguez. There is something that personally makes me really sad, and that's what media is not paying enough attention, or they're not talking enough about. It's Iranian people. While the missiles fly, the Iranian people are in total darkness, internet blackout, economic collapse, and even 100 times, even not more, worse reality than before the war. This regime right now claims victory because they survived the 40 days. But with the infrastructure crumbling, what are they actually surviving for?
I think that they are designed to survive. I think they have a survival instinct because they, even though a great majority of the regime figures are very corrupt, but I think their ideology is still very powerful. Iran is a rentier economy. They have oil. And they can export oil products, petrochemicals. They hope that there will be sanction waivers, and they will be able to export more oil. This corrupt regime, they will every military security group will have their own share of the oil, and they think they will survive, that they will even thrive. Use up a lot of those funding to rebuild their military industrial complex, their missile bases, their security, most importantly probably, their security infrastructure, the police stations, their prisons, and they will probably build better ones, I'm afraid. I think they will build better missile bases, they will develop better missiles, better drones. They don't care about the people. They don't care about infrastructure. Or probably they will do some superficial projects, but most investment will go to the security and missiles and everything that worked well, ballistic missiles, drones, and also those communications and oppressive system that need to be rebuilt, police stations, message stations, that they will try to build them again more efficiently. So I'm afraid that that we will soon, within a few months or a year, we will see a more effective, a more efficient military security establishment within Iran, if they are allowed to survive.
I hope this is not the scenario, because as usual, the main victim, they will be people.
Well, yes. Unfortunately, main victim will be the people. They will see, how uh, these new oil revenues will be allocated. I think they will make the right decision, and how to rise up, how to protest, how to raise their voice, and I think they will see how this will go. And we know what happened to Khorramshahr after Iran-Iraq war. So Khorramshahr still is an underdeveloped. Many parts of the city hasn't been rebuilt after so many decades after the Iran-Iraq war. I think at the larger scheme of things, that is going to be the case with Iran, and we will see ports, infrastructure damaged. Many of those bridges still will be left in ruins for years to come, unless they want or they need to rebuild them for their security purposes. If they think that they need to move assets around quickly, the security forces around, they will rebuild. Definitely, they will airports, heliports. They will buy more helicopters for their police force from Russia and China in order to be able to move assets and security forces around, because of the survival instinct that they have. They need to survive because ideologically they want to attach their regime to them, to the 12 Imam. That's one of the reasons that they need to survive, and also they need to survive because they have nowhere to go. They're in control of the oil revenue, and they have deep pockets.
Right, you're right. Absolutely. These are the worst case scenarios that we are talking about. Uh, they're probable, possible, yes, in my opinion, but the war is not over yet, and everything is changing round the clock. Dr. Nadimi, for the audience watching or listening who wants a free and secular Iran, if the 10-point and 15-point demands are irreconcilable, what is the most likely military endgame? Do you see a transition, or are we simply waiting for the timer on this 2-week truce to hit zero?
We can assume that this ceasefire will hold for a while. I'm not sure if we will have resumption of hostilities right after the 2 week. If it's going to happen, it will happen much quicker, and well before the 2 week deadline. But I think that this ceasefire will hold for some time until the Israeli and the U.S. will realize that this regime hasn't changed. This regime has the same instincts, the survival instincts. That they're spending in their missile program, their drone programs, their stockpiling. Again, they plan for another military campaign. But how different that military campaign will be from this last one, I'm not sure. If President Trump will have the same will and determination to launch this military strike with these dimensions, with the help of Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu is still in charge. It's still prime minister of Israel. No, a lot of things came together to give the CENTCOM, the military, the Israeli U.S. militaries, this opportunity to go ahead with their plannings and all those plans that they had to dismantle Iran's offensive capabilities, the Islamic regime and its oppressive system, and whether all these elements will come back together to create a similar situation. I don't know. It depends a lot on politics and domestic politics in Israel, in the United States, and also in Iran.
That being said, there is a serious and maybe concerning question. So there is tactical and operational achievements, which we can see they have targeted thousands and thousands of targets, inflicted serious damage. But this war mission, enriched uranium, so control over Strait of Hormuz, and missile and drone capabilities, as you mentioned, they're damaged severely, but still standing. None of those objectives of the whole operation has been achieved. So then the question is that, what was this war for? Yes, it is weakened. We know that 100%, but mission is not accomplished yet.
Yes, mission not accomplished. I think one of the main objectives was to downgrade, to dismantle Iran's missile industries, their capabilities to produce offensive weapons, including drones and missiles. And I think they were successful in inflicting serious damage on Iran's military-industrial complex. They tried very hard to degrade the IRGC's missile bases and prevent them from launching large numbers of missiles on a daily basis. To a degree, they were successful, but still, the IRGC manages to fire between 10 and 20 missiles per day. And some of them pass through defensive shields and still inflict damage, especially in Israel, but probably to lesser degree in the Persian Gulf region. For some very good reason that Iran's medium-range ballistic missiles are more effective and more advanced. They have been using more effective missiles against Israelis, and therefore they have a better chance of penetrating Israeli defenses. But yes, I think
no regime change, no uranium enrichment.
Exactly. I think whether Iran and the current regime will agree to hand over the enriched uranium or not, I think if they don't, that the Secretary Hegza today said we would, the U.S. military would go back in to recover those 460 kilograms of highly enriched uranium, and there's about 189 kilograms of 20% enriched uranium, which we don't know where exactly they are too. I think given the experience of recovering those downed crew of the 15E that was shut down on Saturday, I think it won't be an easy undertaking, and it will require a sizable ground forces to occupy the entire area and put up defenses, and not only to to neutralize the locals, create a safe landing area, but they'll have to be prepared to defend against Iranian ballistic missiles and drones for a sizable and prolonged operation to recover those enriched uranium. So it will take days, if not weeks, and that will take a lot of ground forces, I guess. And they also set dismantling of Iran's navy as a military objective. They keep talking about that. Yes, they destroyed Iran's navy, but Iran's navy was never a real threat. Let's be fairly speaking. Iran's navy was not the real threat. The real threat was the IRGC's navy. The Revolutionary Navy was the real threat. And according to the Joint Chief of Staff today in the Pentagon briefing, only about 50% of the IRGC's navy has been destroyed. And I'm a little skeptical about that. I think probably smaller. We can put that at about 30 to 40% of the IRGC navy's capabilities have been destroyed. Given the threatening nature and asymmetric, adaptable nature of the IRGC Navy, I think that's a far more serious threat to the freedom of navigation in the region than Iran's Navy. That is, yes, it is destroyed, sunk, it's underwater, but I think that's, again, not the correct objective. And they talked about the Iranian Air Force. We know that the Iranian Air Force was hardly flyable. Therefore, destroying Iran's air base is very spectacular on the paper or on videos, destroying all those disused F-14s. But again, not a serious threat.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you about, but that you believe it's critical for the world to understand right now?
Well, I believe the world needs to know that the regime is the same regime. They are, with the difference that they are now more vengeful. The new rulers, leaders, they are more determined to harm the United States interests and to push the United States out of the region. We can safely expect, and in fact, it has been part of their 10-point plan that they want the U.S. military or the combat-capable military forces out of the region. And unless we adhere to that demand, I think that is, again, the major point of contention between Iran and the United States. I think we have to understand that this regime is going to be even a more hostile regime toward the U.S. interests, and it will be more hostile to its own people as well. And we know that Iranian, the very good majority of Iranian people are very pro-Western, pro-United States, and they at least so far they have had a good view of the U.S. administration. But that could change. That could change if they feel betrayed, if they feel left behind. And if in that case, we will lose a very good friend in terms of an entity of in general, the Iranian people in the region. I think that will be a major loss.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'd like to close on a personal note. After everything that you have seen and done, what does word freedom mean to you today?
We take freedom now for granted, but it is something that is worth fighting for. It is worth fighting for. It is worth standing up for. It is very personal, but exactly because it's personal, we shouldn't expand our definition of freedom to anybody else's, and we respect that individual freedom is as important as a collective definition for.
Dr. Nadimi, thank you for taking us beyond the headlines.
Thank you for having me.